welcome to the New Earth podcast, which will guide you towards awakening and the embodiment of your highest self through holistic living advice, science, yoga, personal experiences, and expert guests. Let's grow together and build a new Earth. I'm Nancy Crupi, I'm a scientist, and I have a PhD in biology and 15 years of international scientific research experience in fields from inflammation to aging, neurobiology, nutrition, metabolic disorders, and much more. I'm also a Kundalini Awakened spiritual teacher, healer, and coach, and I practice and teach Kundalini Tantra.
And I'm Robie Newman-Paris. I'm a biologist with experience in neuroscience, and I've studied the ancient yogic sciences as well as other Eastern philosophies with gurus and yogis while spending a year and a half in India and in Bali. I now teach Kriya Yoga, breathwork, and meditation and help guide people in their spiritual development. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the New Earth podcast. As you can see, little change, Nancy and I are now here together. So, start of a new era of the podcast. Today we're joined by a wonderful guest, Shaffali. She's a yogi, she's an entrepreneur, she's a healer, she's an author. She has many talents. She's had a beautiful life experience and she's going to be sharing about her life and her learnings, her teachings with us today. So everyone
Shaffali.
Join us in welcoming Shaffali to this show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here with us today. And you guys, I hope you're enjoying this new setting. We'll see how it will continue, but so far we're going to be here together. I and Robie looks like incredible. We're finally together, and also most probably our connection is going to be a lot better because Asheville was really not the best place for internet.
It's
but
true.
Yes, here in LA, connection is very fast, so hopefully our audio is going to be a much smoother this time. So Shaffali, do you want to give us a little introduction about yourself, where you're from, what you want to start with?
Sure. Let's see. My passion is like mind, body, skin, soul, balance, and wellness. And I think I was drawn towards that from a very young age. Growing up with a mother who grew up in India. I grew up here in the US. She would meditate twice a day, still does to this day. And she never really kind of pushed it on me, but through observation, I was just hooked from, again, a young age. I feel like I knew what the energy of like peace and balance felt like in that kind of a, being in that kind of space, and what the energy of blessings feels like, what all these high vibration or various vibrational energies feel like. So I grew up in Rhode Island, went to school in Boston, started out as a science major in biology because of my absolute love for nature, and then was torn, basically switched to business because I felt like a real pull towards doing something in the healing arts, like with a kind of like a larger kind of foundation. And then after business school, went to become a esthetician, a facialist, and also a yogini, and started combining all of that into what became my holistic skincare line, and now eventually like the spoken offerings I have to empower people to be living in their dharma, their life purpose, to
Beautiful.
amplify the aura.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think one question I have right off the bat, which I also had from skimming through your book, which I can just promote really quick. It's a beautiful book.
Thank you.
Check it out. Yeah. We'll put a link for this also in the description for the podcast so you guys can check it out. But so you had a distinction between body and between skin. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on why you drew the line there?
I think it's because from a young age, I thought it was really important to have like self-care rituals, and maybe because I also kind of put a lot of pressure on myself when I was young to like, achieve so much. And I noticed that downtime, aside from meditation, was like needed. And being a teenager, I wanted my skin to glow. And my mom, like I would watch her make like masks and creams at home, and it inspired me. She didn't think it was a big deal. It was sort of normal in her family growing up in India to do that. For me, it was like, Mom, wait a minute, what are you doing? And like, let's go through this. And so, picking apart ingredients in the kitchen, and creating concoctions that like felt amazing on the skin, and combining meditative practices with it. So affirmations, meditation, and for me, like when somebody's skin is glowing, it's a reflection of what's going on inside. But when you can work on it from outside in, it works too. And I find that interesting because sometimes, you know, I think the beauty industry in general can be a bit superficial at times. But there's something about like really deep beauty, meaning like skin is reflecting our health too, like our sometimes our spiritual health, sometimes our physical health, like emotions, everything. So yeah, that's why I make that distinction.
Absolutely, I love it. And like the skin is another place where we purge energy, we purge
Completely.
chemicals, we purge toxins. Because what this is the skin is ultimately the last layer, the last boundary of our body towards the outside, right? And so if you have something inside that is boiling of whatever kind, it can be a toxin or it can be energetic,
Right.
then it has to express itself. And where does it express itself? Right on the skin. Ultimately, that's the ultimate place. So if you have a lot of turmoil or you go through a lot of stress, ultimately this pitta energy, like this energy that is really like too much, can really
Yeah.
boil up to the point of going to the skin. And I feel like you're right. I love what you said about the fact that the industry tends to be very superficial, because we talked about this many times in our podcast about the fact that Western medicine and the beauty industry tend to just trim the grass instead of going to the root of the problem. And so
Right.
obviously if
Nourish
you
the
take
soil, our skin, you know, so
yeah, and so if you just obviously take care of the actual most superficial layer of it, but you don't take care of the root cause of things, then nothing's gonna change. It's just you're gonna become dependent on a product that then you need to use for your whole life. And instead, as you're doing, like I love the meditation and affirmation that there are, like I recently also
oh
read a
yeah.
book by Joe Dispenza as well, in which he talks about doing meditations for reconnecting with the skin and healing. Like actually, he talks about organs in general, but I've done it for my skin. For example, I invented a meditation for my skin, and it helped me improve my skin a
Oh,
lot.
oh,
Yeah. So like,
beautiful.
I love. So what do you do for your skincare?
Yeah, well, actually, as you were talking, I kept thinking of our pineapple and peppermint exfoliant, which is our face scrub, because each product has a ritual name, and the ritual for, or a ritual associated with the product. So for that product, the ritual is the detoxification ritual. And why that is I connect it very deeply too. Like, okay, we're gonna inhale and take a deep breath in as you basically start to think about things you want to let go of. And then as you exhale, go ahead and let go. And this is all in the process of scrubbing the skin. So it's really like powerful. It's like a mirrored effect of here, I'm taking a physical action as an act of self-care and purging. I'm going to, give myself this massage with this beautiful award-winning product, and we're gonna put it on. But also I'm going to reinforce, it's sort of like neuro-linguistic programming, positive psychology, things that I believe in very much. And it's like, meditate on the mantra, I am detoxified. And that's part of using the skin. So it's really so much more deeper than skin, right? It's like yeah. So anyway, there's rituals like that for each product, and that's just one example. So our cleanser is the purification ritual, and mask is the ritual of course, I've gotten nervous here. I'm like, it's really beautiful when I remember. Not replenishment. I'm so sorry. I hope you guys cut this out.
It's
Nourishment.
okay.
No, it's
Nourishment.
not nourishment. It's not. It's
But
not
anyways, in the meantime, if you think about it, like I
renewal.
really love what
Renewal.
you're doing.
It's the
What?
ritual of renewal. So it's
Renewal.
Renewal.
yeah, and there's again an energetic meaning and like a physical meaning to each of these. And it's really beautiful to like do meditations while doing, your skincare, because it's very empowering. Sometimes my emotions go up and down a lot, and sometimes when I'm like having a really tough day, I'll pause everything and actually do a self-care facial, like all of these steps, and suddenly it's like everything changes. So
Absolutely. And you're also basically affecting your epigenome, because like when we meditate and when we prep ourselves, like instead of just applying a product on your skincare. Like this is like we should have a full episode on the placebo effect, you know, like but what you're actually doing is basically you are connecting the products that you're applying in their power, their like herbal medicine powder to the self-healing power of your body. And so what you're doing is you're allowing yourself to take a break, you're
Yeah.
allowing yourself to quench whatever energy you were purging, right? And to reconnect with the present because you're being present, right? You're actually being in your skin instead of thinking of something else and being stressed out and then expect for that product to heal everything, which is impossible.
Yeah. I think
It's
it's really beautiful adding that step of ritual too. That's something that we've talked about before on the podcast, where when you take that moment, it's like that space becomes sacred. You put your awareness into the space. You say, this is the time where I'm going to go into myself. I'm going to work on myself. I'm going to tune out the exterior world. I'm going to just really focus on my healing, on, releasing, on purifying, on cleansing. And the fact
yeah.
that you have an associated ritual with each of your products, I really find that so beautiful. So thank you for creating those products.
It's genius.
It is genius. And I would love to try these now that you've mentioned it also. But it's really beautiful. And also when you do that, when you're using like sacred herbs too, I'm assuming you're using things that have actual medicinal power, but also in the sense these have, spirit that's associated with them as well. There's a certain frequency that's associated with the pineapple, with the salt, with everything. And when you take that ritualistic time to connect, you're connecting to that energy. You're drawing out, okay, the pineapple wants to purify me. It's touching into the purifying power of that herb with both the actual physical applying on your skin, but also with your own mind, with your own consciousness kind of interacting. Because, as we've said before, we are all in one consciousness. There's not really these strict divides. Like, you might see the skin as the dividing line between the inside and the outside, but really the skin is not a barrier in the way that we think of it. And when we kind of wipe away that barrier a little bit, you allow the energy of whatever you're putting on your skin to come in.
And not only that, like I feel like I perceive the universe as all the different things, that all the different forms are simply the spectrum of all the functions. They were already part of us as universe, right? So we had all these functions, all the different kinds of human beings, all the different herbs, all the different things. They were one at some point before the Big Bang, right? And so what happened now is that we have diversified, and all of these functions are located in different things. So once you join these two functions, which are complementary, like like injury or wound and the healing power, right? You join these things together. These are just the two pieces of the puzzle that were just already meant to be together to reach healing, to reach oneness. So you are doing that, and you are allowing the conscious. This is a shamanic way of doing things as well, which I heard you also have experience on shamanic medicine, because what you're doing is really doing what shamans do, which is using the herbs and the consciousness of the human being, right? We merge our consciousness so that the consciousness of the plant and the consciousness of your body and of you work together to heal. And it's a completely different dimension than just applying something on your skin. So really thank you for doing this.
Oh, thanks. And I mean, I love connecting with like-minded community because so much of what both of you were saying resonated. And one thing was that Robie, right? Robie,
Yeah.
you were saying something about the washing away the surface to connect with others. And really, we're amplifying our aura. And when we all can amplify our aura, the light is so big that we are in oneness consciousness, right? Because we're like, oh yeah, we are connected. There's this light here that is connecting us. Right?
Literally
So,
glowing.
completely. So for me, it's about like radiance. Beauty is in the radiance, and radiance is coming from reflecting the light within. So in fact, the mantra for my line, the brand mantra is reflect the light within. So it really is about that. Yeah, and
I think you're embodying it. You're really embodying it because first of all, your skin is incredible. I've seen you live, like in person. Her skin is just perfect. She has zero imperfections. Now, part of it is for sure genetics, but I'm sure that you do a lot for your skin through your skin care, and I can tell that you're really a perfect skin. But also, I can tell that you're glowing. Like this energy that you have, the radiance. Because once you take care of from the outside in, which is all these rituals you do, you reconnect with everything that is wounded in you. Everything needs healing. And if you take the time to really be like, okay, what is wrong with me right now? Why am I purging on my skin? What am I having this? Why am I having this? And so if you connect with this ritual, being present with yourself and in your body, then you give time to your body, to things that are wounded. And time is love. Time is ultimately really like the real love, like quality time is a form of love, but time is love, right? And so you're
Right.
giving love.
And you're taking that quality time with yourself too,
Yeah.
which is really important because,
Yeah.
I know it, especially Nancy, but also everyone else in this modern world where we're all so busy, we forget to take that time for ourselves. We
Oh my
don't nourish
gosh.
ourselves. We don't heal ourselves. And that's really the most important thing. You can't shine your light. You can't be that radiance
Mhm.
without, bringing that energy inside, bringing that awareness inside and
Oh,
finding
yeah.
that light and then allowing it to shine out. But yeah, I would like to just go back a little bit to your story. Maybe you can kind of walk us through a little bit about how your journey went down, how you came to be the person that you are now, and so
Okay.
maybe some of the things you learned along the way too.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. And just last comment I want to make about like when we are combining like herbs together and like that were separated, that were once one. I feel like that's what we're doing as people too, and I mentioned that already with like amplifying our aura, but it's another way of looking at it, right? Like what we do in our lives, if we look at the symbolism of what we do too, it kind of is reflected in other ways. So I just wanted to kind of like mention that. Okay, so about my story, I feel like in this life, I started out pretty kind of in like awake, and what and how I kind of conclude that is after having kind of an awakening experiences and regularly practicing tuning in like my daily meditation, knowing the place I'm going is, oh yeah, familiarity of like what it was like when I was very young. I'd get lost in kind of just like, you could say it was like a meditative state, more than anything. And it was so beautiful, like eyes closed and just like really in it. So I would say that some of my life experiences added layers of masking, inauthenticity, just challenges in life. And I think that everyone's experiences are valid and unique. And given that, like, I grew up in Rhode Island, Indian, that was like, oh, okay, felt a little different. There was no other Shaffali in my school. And so there was that, but it wasn't so much just that. It was also growing up with like these parents that were immigrants, right? And they were bringing some things that I found so beautiful. Like I said, these spiritual practices that my mom was very much, kind of devoted to, loved. But then I was also very embarrassed by my family, like they didn't want to speak in English to me. They were struggling. There was a lot of things there that it was like just adding layers, like a bit of insecurity, you could say. And then also we were having clashes with just like world views on certain things, especially like when it came to progressive views for women. That was some, these are all parts of some of those layers that developed. And over time, basically one thing that was my guiding light throughout was always following my heart. I think that is seriously can save you in so many ways. It might
Definitely.
seem, yeah, it might seem hard sometimes, but like really just and what I mean by that also is like tuning into what does it feel like when you're aligned, like getting used to the feeling, right? Because there's the feeling of our intuition, that's like a certain vibration and feeling when you're connecting to, oh, my entire being is saying yes to this, or my entire being is saying no to this. Same with the heart, right? And ideally it's a clear channel, so it's like an entire being, my mind, body, skin, soul, all of it is saying yes or no. And so there's been this relentless pursuit of the things that light me up, hence the title of my book, What Lights You Up? Reflections of a Modern Mystic. I get really excited, thank you. I get excited by when I see that light in people's eyes, right? Like I've always been drawn to that because it's inspiring, right? When you're seeing the light in somebody else's eyes, you know that they're doing something that's like, yes, right? And then also, if you're a person who likes to do that, you almost need to surround yourself by that to reinforce it, right? Because there's going to be we have it we are in a society that kind of is a hustle culture. It's been guided by the patriarchy, and it's got a lot of imbalance in masculine and feminine energy. There's a fly in the room. I don't know, like, does it bother you guys? Do you see it?
It's all
Like,
right.
We don't really see
okay,
that. Oh, we sometimes actually. It's
there's
fine.
like a lot of doors where I am and with no screens and a lot of plants inside. So I think the combination. Anyway, not to get distracted, but I was. But like
Attracted to your
basically,
aura.
well, no, I do say that about a lot of animals and babies, but I guess flies count as well. Like, but anyway, funny enough, I have two small kids, and we just watched a documentary about like there was about nature, and it was showing flies in the city, like the
Mm.
episode was, and I was like, guys, this is what I mean about you don't want the flies near your food, because it was showing a fly sitting on like dog poop and then like going onto somebody's sandwich, and anyway, tangent. But
And I think
anyway,
this is, I want to add something to this because just once you mentioned it, so it makes sense too. I feel like everything again as a function, including flies, all the functions have been
oh,
split.
sure.
And so flies have the function of showing humans where we should not go. Because imagine in ancient times, we didn't know whether something was poisonous for us. But if
Yeah,
flies go there, that means that thing can cause an infection. And flies are so, we get bothered by flies so much that we try to stay
right.
away from them. So basically, they create an aura of a place that is not for us. Like they build their own niche, and their niche and
Yeah,
our niche don't overlap. And so,
right.
because of that, and thanks to that, ancient cultures have been able to find
Uh,
places that were better for them instead of going in places whether maybe there were cadavers or there was
mm,
something going on, or if there are a lot
right,
of cadavers of animals, maybe there are a lot of predators. So
right.
everything can is really a function in the universe. So this is just to
Yeah,
close the circle of the
Mhm.
flies.
I love
Yeah,
it.
please continue.
So let's see. Like I get so like caught up in like what we're saying that I'm just like in it. Where I forget what I was saying earlier about layers forming through
Mhm.
life experiences. And basically like starting to kind of there's always been following my heart, there's always been spiritual practices also, like yoga, like meditation, like ecstatic dance. These are some of the top three. Journaling too, like that. I've been keeping a journal since I was 9. So like really deep kind of reflections. And then basically there came a time where I found myself in my 30s living in New York City and having the skincare line and kind of hitting a wall with just like life in feeling these pressures of certain things. I mean, New York is a very intense place. And I was feeling the effects of that too. So I started to pair my meditation and yoga practice with self-development, like through courses, books, different coaches, and I got involved with like Landmark for a little while. And that was like, I like the different approaches of trying different modalities, not getting like hooked into one, but like trying different ones to see what resonates and what comes through them. So that was like
Definitely.
the beginning of a
There's,
journey
yeah, I
of
mean, I think everything you can join, every kind of potential movement, it's going to have its own unique lessons that you can learn from it. And it doesn't mean that like one person will learn the same lessons that someone else is learning from something, but there's like everything in your life has its own lifespan. And that's like related to the relationships that you have, whether it's with people, with organizations, with particular teachings. And some of those might go your whole life. Some of them might go several years. Some of them might be just a month or even a day or even a conversation in passing. But if you're aware, if you're in the present moment, if you're connected to your own internal compass, you will learn lessons from all of those things. So it's really about, feeling grateful that, this lesson came to me, even if it's not resonating anymore, even if I'm being brought in this other direction now, that I was put in this place and I was supposed to be there and I learned from it. And it was part of my journey.
yeah, completely. I'm a big believer in that for sure. Like it's a wonderful way to look at things too, because you can stay in the flow of life of like this person or this event was like, meant to be for this duration rather than getting hooked into a resistant energy, which kind of holds you back from like learning, growing, and being in the flow. So basically, I was trying to let go of resistant energy, and I was wanting to, I knew there was more. I have very strong visions, and there's been many times in my life I've worked with vision boards that just like come to life, in their own time, exactly when they're meant to, right? So, because sometimes people
Right.
ask me, well, how long? It's like, well, sometimes you make a vision for something and it comes true in like a couple days, and sometimes it's like 2 years or 20 years. And it's like you just trust, be in the energy of trust too, which is also a flow energy. So living in New York and trying to figure out like, oh, something's not feeling right. Like relationships aren't going so well, personal relationships, romantic relationships, my business. What is it about it that's like not? I'm in a rut here. Like this is, what's going on here. And the thing that was giving me the most happiness was teaching yoga and meditation. So I was happy with that. And I was getting amazing opportunities for that as well. So that was going great. But then again, there's struggles in other areas. And with starting to do like the deep dives into more self-development that was based on psychology. And in fact, something like Landmark is also rooted in psychology and Eastern wisdom as well. So, which is like spirituality and psychology coming together. So like these things were resonating and helping to recognize layers that I wanted to kind of remove. And they were the shadows, the ugly of like, oh, I never saw myself that way, the blind spots. And it's like, okay, as I started doing that, rapid change started happening where, my communities were changing, the people in my life were changing, especially because if I myself had worn so many veils and was masking to be a certain way, well, then I'm going to attract a lot of people who might not be resonating with my authentic self as I'm on the path to discovering this authentic self and knowing that, oh, yeah, it makes sense to follow this or to embody this authentic self because, oh, I'm following my heart when I'm doing that. And also the energies in my meditation and my yoga practices I'm seeing like lots and lots of light flowing versus, like, so just kind of putting pieces together and realizing that it's like a pattern of breakdown, breakthrough, breakdown, or looking at the shadow, finding the light, looking at, oh, there's a new shadow. I'm humbled, like, wow. And then like finding the light for that, and I think the key is awareness, right? Like, and being open. These things help us because we can't always predict, like, what is that ugly I'm gonna uncover in me? And I think some of us who try the hardest to be beautiful or present a certain way have the most to uncover sometimes. It's like, oh, yeah,
Absolutely. And what you
yeah.
said about like all the layers that you had on top, that you're like, I was born very awakened, but then society put all those there. This is my same exact experience. As a child, a
Hmm.
5 year old, I literally invented, like, I come from a family that has no spirituality at all, almost like we're not even religious that much.
Mm.
And I, as a 5 year old, I invented this meditation to remember that I was the universe. Nobody
Oh
told
my
me that.
God.
I've never
Like
studied yoga.
past life knowledge coming in.
And I will make poisons with like herbs and flowers and roses and these sort of things. And so I feel like as a kid, I was already very awakened. I would really like take care of the ants, take care of the
Hmm.
animals, take care of everything. And then life put a lot of layers on me, like the social norms and thinking all of all the things I need to do, which is your same experience in the end. It's everybody's
Yeah.
experience. Like it's society that teaches us and indoctrinates us to fit into certain boxes because if you fit in a box, you're much more easy to handle because it's a discretized system in which you belong to a stereotype, right? And it's like a computer. Otherwise, you're unpredictable. And so we tend to be forcefully induced to have all of these layers and all of these things because that allows society to be perpetuated, to have a family, to have kids. So there are more taxpayers in the future and more customers and more patients. And if you're disconnected from your body, then you're irrational and you get pathologies that then somebody can sell you a pill for. So this is really I feel like we all are born better than how we become. We make this arc, right? This is how the universe works, however.
Yeah.
It's not even It's not even nobody's fault in a sense. It's the universe how it is, because we are really these bubbles that pop out of the earth and roam around for a little bit and then go back to the earth. So
Right.
this thing is really how gravity works. We have an energy that we grow and we change and we go through these whole stress and things that change us. And then after we reach the peak, then we finally go back to ourselves and we remember and we shed away all of these things that allowed us in a sense to have a family sometimes or to have a place in society, but then also we're toxic to our true self. And then we need to shed away and to go back and to get peace again and to get quiet again and to go inward and understand our truth. And I have a phrase on my wall here that says, you never find yourself until you find the truth. And you until you want to, you face the truth. And so I feel like the main issue with people is that you've been very courageous and brave to do that, because people
Oh yeah.
what the reason why people have so many mental illness so far and everybody's on Adderall and like antidepressants is because people don't want to face the truth, because the
Yeah.
truth is shadow, the truth is ugly. But reality is that unless you face that, you never become like you never become this beautiful
Right.
radiant person that shines the light on the world. And once you heal, you can heal others. Once you heal, you can shine your light. But
For
until you have the shadow, you really can't. And so it's really important that we see that shadow and we shine light on it. And
sure.
I actually especially do some in my practice, I teach people how to use certain ways to shine light on their shadow and to heal their shadow. So it's so important, because otherwise we just have these places that are like on the back of our head, that they're there all the time. We just don't realize how much we're thinking of those things, well, how much they occupy space in our mind. And that means that we are energy. And if part of our energy is focused on something that we don't want to see, that we're trying to push away, we have lesser energy, lesser light that we can utilize on the things that make us soar and make us
Oh, for
be
sure.
pretty and beautiful.
Yeah.
So reality is that that is so necessary and allows you to, once you process that, that allows you to bloom so much better, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Another
sure.
interesting thing also about, people like us that have had experiences or more openness as a young child. This is actually something that, relates to having done spiritual practice in past lives. That's something that one of my teachers says. And I think it's really true
Oh yeah.
because I have the same experience. Like, when I was a small child, I was like, connecting to the consciousness of the sun and like,
Yeah.
channeling the energy into my body. And it was just completely natural to me. It wasn't like I was thinking this is some like make pretend like believe thing. It wasn't my imagination. It was me connecting spiritually to the entity of the sun, to the entities of the plants all around me, and like
Mhm.
creating balls of energy. And I was like,
Yeah,
Mom,
yeah.
look, I can heal you with this ball of energy. And she's like, Oh, you're so funny. And then the layer comes on, and then I go to school, and
Mhm.
everyone's like, Oh, did you see that football game? Another layer comes on, and then
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
all of these things that just like build up. It's exactly what you're saying. It's like we have these shells, these outer protective barriers that
Mhm.
go around us, and they help us in some senses to fit in and to like mesh with society, but they're really rooted in inauthenticity, and they're rooted in not our true self. And when we let those layers dictate our behaviors, then we're not going to be behaving in our according to our heart's desire, and we're not going to have that open channel that you were talking about before. So these things are really important. And I think a lot of the work of people that have these experiences as children is to to come back into that kind of innocence that you have as a
Yes.
child, where this thing is, it's duh, no, of course it works this way, like this is just how it is. And when you're a
Yeah.
child, you don't have
The
those
confidence,
thoughts.
the
Yeah,
confidence. I think all
Yes.
comes down to going through all of these things and questioning ourselves and second guessing ourselves, because there is this all peer pressure, because everybody gets indoctrinated in the same way to fit in the same model, and then everybody perpetuates and expects you to be part of this narrative and to perpetuate this narrative. And if you're different, because not everybody is like us, like there are some kids that are more awakened than others, and some
definitely.
kids, so there are some people that really have more difficulties. They really believe more in the narrative that it's told to us, and there are more some that instead they are very much born awakened already, probably because of past lives in which we have already reached that level of awakening. And so when we are
Right,
born, we already have that level of, we already made more progress in that sense.
right.
And so I think in general, it's all about, you reach a point in which it's so painful to stay in that narrative that
Right.
then you're like, it's lesser painful for you to go against all the peers. You
Hmm.
know
Right.
what I mean? It's all about pain. Like everything we change, whenever the pain of staying in the same place is higher than the pain of going to the unknown, to change it,
Right.
to go against others. So that's how change
Right.
happens in general.
Yeah.
And so we all have to just acquire the confidence needed
Yeah,
to be like, I was right from the beginning. This is
exactly.
wrong.
Right. Right.
Like that's it, guys. This is how I am, for example. I'm like, I've been through a lot of things as well in my life in which I believed what other people told me, especially in science. And I'm like, no, I've actually said yes to a lot of things that didn't make any sense. Now I'm sure that it wasn't true. Like I had to follow my intuition. So I
Right.
feel like that's all of us had the same
Same
experience.
experience, yeah. It also
Yeah.
relates to like having potentially a Kundalini awakening in a past life. That's another thing my teacher says is that, if you have that intense spiritual awakening, then you're more likely to be born in this life with kind of what can be considered like siddhis or powers that like
Right.
allow you to do things that like,
Absolutely.
are naturally in the human possibility to do, but most people don't have access to this because their energy channels aren't open enough for that. But it's something that if you've had that opening in a past life, then you're born with more openness in this life so that you have access to some of those things.
Yeah, no, for sure. I believe that like the siddhis or these advanced psychic powers are available to anyone. However, depending on your karma from a past life, what light you've cultivated, and what practices you do in this life, you are able to unlock these siddhis. And that's why some of us can have such strong connections to things like our intuition, following our heart, letting our heart lead the way, or like just knowing, having an inner knowing, other, like telekinetics or telepathy, being really connected to somebody and like without words and things like that. So yeah, I believe this. And I also think that what we're talking about is like a remembrance, whether it's a remembrance in what you felt in your childhood and youth of like how the world is, of like what we're here, to do, spread light and love, make it, live our dharma and deliver the special gifts that we have, the unique gifts that we all have. And also a remembrance of like past lives, what have we cultivated in the past that can help to our contribution. And there's actually a term I use in the book. So I bring in a lot of Hindi words in the book because a
Mhm.
lot of my spiritual education has come from my mom, and she uses the Hindi version of words. And I refer to it's called the innocent inner insan. And insan translates roughly to kind of like the soul, but there's like an implication of the inside of anyone. Meaning, like when you're speaking Hindi and you're talking about somebody's insan, it's like implying that you're like seeing them, like really the inner them. The insan. So I talk about like on this journey to go through the chakras to like harness their power, we first have to connect with the inner innocent insan. And how we do that is by looking at like there's a lot of activities you can do for each chakra, but if you make them like playful and spiritual, that connects you to a childlike innocent version of you. And also it brings like a real levity to spirituality, which I think is so beautiful because in it is a pure thing. It is like an innocent thing that children are embodying, right? Like so it's that's interesting that we're talking about remembrance, because I like this concept of thinking about connecting to our insan, which is again like that inner us, like that pure, the place we go to in meditation, right? Complete
Yeah,
bliss, complete love.
absolutely. And it's really interesting actually also you mentioned like, the innocence of being a child, like one of
Yeah.
Can you
the
give it to me?
Yeah, it was in the
This is the
book.
queen
And
of pure essence. The pure
mhm,
essence is the in
yeah,
song we're talking
yeah,
about, right? So this is
yeah,
totally.
perfect.
Look
like
at
one
that.
of the aspects of
Mm,
this world, like one of the frameworks you can look at it through is the framework of the Leela, which is the divine play. This is, the divine coming down into the physical world to play and to enjoy and
yes,
to partake
yes,
and
yes,
experience life. And when you look at the world through this framework, it becomes beautiful. The most difficult things just become, a character on the screen that's the bad guy, and it takes away their power and it brings the power into that sense of, childlike wonder that when you
right.
embody that, that's when you truly find bliss and happiness. because
Oh,
it takes away all of the pressure from everything. You know, when you're a
right.
child, you don't have that pressure. You have just innately the sense of
Yeah.
everything is easy, everything is play. And
Right.
we forget that when we become adults. And again, with
Right.
these layers coming on, but when you start peeling them back, life just seems to be more and more fun,
Oh
and
my
more things just become games. It's really beautiful,
goodness.
I
actually.
like what you said because I never thought of it that way, in the sense that ultimately what changes throughout growth is also the level of stress we undergo, right? And so as soon as we start in school, for example, because
Mhm.
there are a lot of layers to this, in the sense that, like, neurobiologically speaking, consciousness is in the cortex, which is a cortical part of the brain, which is right now, because we are in a phase of evolution of our consciousness. And so
Mhm.
right now our cortex, which is that part of the brain needed for us to be conscious and clear minded and connected to the whole, is very, very delicate, and is very, very affected by stress, to the point that we tend to develop it when we become like 22, 23, because the rest of the time our society ultimately suppresses us from developing our consciousness through stress, right? And so what actually changes, that we talk about it as layers, right? Now, what these layers are simply us drifting away from our power, drifting away from our consciousness, drifting away from us being present, and starting to be stressed out and peer pressured into fitting into a certain reference model that it's not, is very general, and it doesn't have anything to do with the frequency that we all our insan embodies and is, right? So we are
Right.
all different. We're pressured to fit into this thing, to become consumers and students and
Right.
patients, and to go to the doctor, and to go to the teacher, and to go to the lawyer, and to go to all of these things, right? And so I think stress, as you're saying, I feel like it's a huge component of us drifting away. Like, imagine a life in which, instead of being, suddenly you start school and you're pressured to have good scores, or for whatever pressure, right? And bullying and all of these things, especially for kids like us that were very awakened, we're often surrounded by people who are more bully type and hostile type of behaviors. Then all of that pressure obviously turns off the consciousness that we could develop thanks to our cortex, and kind of delays our development. I feel like I have really bloomed into my consciousness after I had that. I had my awakenings from gaslighting, from all of these things, in which finally my brain has been allowed to fully develop, and I had a Kundalini awakening, in fact, which is the blooming of your cortical brain, basically, over like the clear mindedness that sheds away all the stress. So I think this is a huge component, like neurobiological component, that we don't realize that is more about stress than about the indoctrination itself.
Hmm.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And I feel like stress also, like when we lean into, like, if we're thinking about like the chakras, the aura, energy, and like how we amplify our light, and how stress can kind of, like you're connecting it, can bring it down, is stepping really into like faith and trust, right? Like those things have always been the saving grace for me personally. And I think a lot of people who are on like a light path, is like real belief in like this divine energy and the divinity within as well. And there's a big difference, I think, when, I see with people who might not necessarily like, they might like be not question that, like question the divine, like question light within, being a little skeptical. There's like a impenetrable layer sometimes there that can't really, it's like a, you can't crack in the light there, because that the faith and the trust are the things that are going to unlock that sometimes, I think, so.
And faith and trust are something that's always going back. It fits all together perfectly what I'm saying, because ultimately what faith does is it removes the fear factor. Because if you know that everything is going to go well, you're not fearful anymore. So the reason why our cortex tends to be turned off by stress is because we start compulsively thinking and trying to strategize and use the inner part of the brain, like such as the amygdala, that ultimately becomes an inner source of stress. Because when you start compulsively thinking, then it is you who becomes the inner source of stress. And that is
Mhm.
all led by fear, the fear of not being able to bring good
Oh,
scores to your parents, the fear of not being able to go to school and be free from bullies. All these fears that we have become inner sources of stress that constantly turn off our cortex. And so definitely having faith, and I think you really have been saved in a sense by your practice, that by the fact that you as a family, and this is so important this explains how important it is for even kids to do yoga and to do
Oh,
and to
certainly.
absolutely to do
Oh, for
yoga and to know that they have to have faith, which has nothing to do with divinity in the sense that some people, some families are atheists, like, so this can go beyond that, regardless of what you believe in, still believing that everything is going to go well, and obviously in a way that like allows you to remove the fear factor. And then once you're in your cortex, that allows you to take the clear decisions that you need to take that are way more effective and way more efficient, that allows you a much better survival
Mhm.
than your fight or flight mode, that at this point is a very obsolete way of thinking. And
Right.
so obviously, like the fact of having faith, guys try to really have faith that everything goes well. I have it tattooed on my arm. I say it all the time, which says nothing bad can happen, because ultimately, whatever happens is what is meant to happen. It's the same thing as
Right.
a butterfly and a caterpillar. The caterpillar doesn't know that he's supposed to become a butterfly. It just goes through pain and is
Right.
like, okay, I have to get closed into this, locked into this cocoon. And once he's in the cocoon, he's like, okay, it's too painful to be in the cocoon. I have to get out. And once he gets out, it's a butterfly. But if you tell the caterpillar, don't worry about it, you're going to become a butterfly, it's going to tell you,
Oh,
what's
you're
a
crazy,
butterfly?
man.
What's a butterfly, right? So it doesn't know what a butterfly is. So it's the same for us. We don't realize that we have a spiritual shape.
Mm,
This insan is a spiritual, energetic shape that
yeah.
also changes through life. That we are trapped in this physical body that changes just physically, and we don't become a different species. We just grow. But
Yep.
spiritually speaking, in our brain as well. And
Mhm.
funny enough, our brain, if you section it, it has a shape of a butterfly. So, like, if you, we do have this spiritual shape that changes through time, even most probably after we die as a body, it changes and it grows and
Mm.
it grows. And it grows in a way that goes beyond what our body can do. And so we don't see that we go from this caterpillar to the cocoon to the butterfly, but ultimately what is depression sometimes, it's a cocoon, right? What is
Mhm.
PTSD sometimes is feeling that this is too painful, you need to get out. So all of
Sure.
these things that we don't give it a name, like it's really like processes that happen in nature. And so having faith in the process, because there is a wisdom that goes beyond us as people, and that is the same thing as being a cell of the body and be like, I don't know why I'm doing this. But there is a bigger wisdom, the reason why each cell of our body is doing a specific thing. There is a reason why that has to do with being part of a whole. And because the cell does that specific task, the whole allows the cell itself to survive. And so we are built to go through all of these changes. And so if you allow yourself to surrender to these flow things, as much as a caterpillar has to surrender, because he has no idea what a butterfly is. But if he just surrenders, he's automatically going to become a butterfly. So
Right.
we really have to surrender and have faith. And once we remove the fear factor, we just
Yeah.
can do that.
Another interesting thing that I think distinguishes, the human experience from the experience of other beings is, other animals have this built in. This is just part of nature where they have this knowing that's an intuitive knowing that I'm on my path. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. When you bring in all the layers of humanity, when you bring in the human ego, you get in this place where you forget these things. Your ego takes away your power, and society takes away your power and says, okay, we're going to give you as much confusion, as much doubt as possible. And when you
Yeah.
get into that state, you forget, like,
Yeah.
wait, I actually know what I'm doing the whole time. But it's
Yeah.
like this knowing that gets lost. This nescience has to reemerge as, something that, again, you have to build up trust with it. And I think it's a really important thing that I've seen in my journey. Like, it takes time to build these things. When you first start out on this journey, it might be very hard to have that faith, to like have that inner trust that I'm doing the right thing, that I'm on the right path. But the more and more that you go into it, and the more that you see, okay, like I'm actually getting exactly what I need at every given moment. Even if, like, if I look into the future and I'm like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to survive tomorrow. Maybe I'm completely out of money and I don't have anything to support me, but where I'm at right now, I'm okay. I'm safe. I'm protected. And you bring yourself back into that state more and more times, and then you see what happens. Maybe tomorrow, something happens and you get $2,000 in your bank account, and suddenly you can pay rent and buy food again. And you didn't have any knowledge that was going to happen, but you trusted in the fact that something would have to shift. You trusted in the fact that you were on the right path. You were exactly where you were meant to be at that given moment, which is something that's true for all of us. As deep and dark as some of the places we might seem to be in, really we are exactly where we're meant to be, and we are exactly learning the lessons that we're supposed to be learning. And I think also another thing that's interesting when you talk about depression is you can reframe all these things. Depression is like deep rest, depressed, deep rest. So really, it might seem dark and it might seem heavy, but it's a state, it's a cocoon. Exactly.
Right.
It's a state where you can go back and kind of touch the source in a way that's maybe more unconscious. And then when you come out of that cocoon, then you are able to really shine your light brighter because you've gone that, you've gone inside, you've done that internal work. And going back again to what you're saying about the shadows, this is something else that, even spiritual people can really struggle with this one because doing shadow work is really hard and is really real. And it really touches like the core of like what makes us, hurt. And we don't want to face these things as humans. It's scary. It's, we're scared of the dark for a reason. The darkness comes from inside. That's like the real darkness that we're scared of. When it is expressed in the outside world, it just mirrors that inside darkness that we don't want to face. But the more and more that we start to face this, we face the unknown, we face, the sides of us that we don't necessarily like or that aren't in alignment, the more we can say, okay, like this is here, but I still love this. It's still part of me. And then it becomes, rather than something that's a shadow that's holding you back, it becomes one of your greatest weapons against the shadow because you understand it. And with that understanding, with that acknowledgement, this is part of me, you accept it into yourself, and then it can be processed and can be healed. And you can use that exact same thing to help heal others and to shine even brighter because it's almost like you're reclaiming your territory. And even if it's something that you don't want to claim, it's hard to like say, I'm taking responsibility for this dark thing, this depression inside of myself, this anger inside of myself. I don't want to touch it. That's what most people think. That's what, we all think when we're on the path.
Or we want to put a patch on it.
Right. But then like when we actually, okay, say, I'm going to lovingly embrace this, even if it's causing me some discomfort. It's like, maybe like you feel like you're hugging a cactus at first, but then after a while, you start to just integrate that into yourself and you realize that it all comes from a divine source and it all has a divine purpose. And then when the attribute of love is present in that darkest shadow, then that love can shine out and touch someone else who's still trying to work through that particular shadow. And you can, and I say this a lot, but I think it's really, really important. Like you don't know the impact that you're having on other people, even if it's just one little conversation, even one little phrase that you have with someone that maybe let's say you meet in a yoga class and they come up for advice afterwards and you say something that, doesn't seem super meaningful to you. You forget about it. Maybe 10 minutes later, you go about your day. But to that person, that was a distinguishing moment in their life of change where something clicked in their awareness and they came into a new frame of understanding of their world. And you have no idea. You just went about your day. But the impact that you can have in every moment is so powerful when you're in alignment. So that's why it's so important to do this work because you might not even realize the good you're doing, but you're still doing it. And the more that you're aligned, the more that central channel is clear and open, the more that you're able to have these little moments of synchronicity, even if you don't realize that you're having them. So I think all this is beautiful. And I think it kind of ties into the next subject I'd like to touch on.
Finish because I want
you want to share something first? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, because I think what this all goes together with your life story as well, in the sense that a lot of this not lack of capability of working on our shadows to the point until later in life, or even worse, putting patches that then make us become incapable, such as antidepressant drugs. Antidepressant drugs are actually things that make it physically impossible to work on your shadow. So it locks people into a zombie kind of state, and it makes it even difficult for them to get out of it because then they're dependent and their body goes into withdrawal symptoms if they live. So it's a cage for your consciousness that doesn't allow you to get out of it, but it makes you become a perfect employee in a company, right? So this is the worst that people are facing today, which is the spread of antidepressant drugs.
Right.
And so, first of all, I think that
quick fix is what people are looking for, unfortunately.
Absolutely, because it's so painful to look into the shadow, but this is created by society because we all are like, imagine we live in a society in which we are these like all different kinds of people with different kinds of survival strategies, etc. But like for some reason, our society only glorifies one specific behavior, which is functional for our society, and everything else is bad. And so obviously people feel the peer pressure of hiding their shadow. That's not even a shadow. I feel like we consider that a shadow because there is shame attached to being ourselves. It's the same thing as if the caterpillar has to become a cocoon, but everybody says that being a cocoon is bad. So you're basically blocking the development, the natural development of that caterpillar, because there is no way for that caterpillar to become a butterfly unless it goes through the cocoon. And so we live in a society that purposefully, like intentionally, blocks our spiritual development, but making it become shameful to embody all the things we are necessarily forced to embody as part of our spiritual development. So if
Right.
facing the fact that you're egoic, it's necessary for you to see your ego and to undo all these things, and to develop, then you're never going to face your ego. You're going to put it in the back of your mind. You're going to pretend you're going to become a covert narcissist, like someone who basically pretends to be a nice person, but back is really trying to passive aggressively manipulate others. But those people are simply people who have certain capacities, certain skills that give them a different survival strategies in society, and they just society tells them that they're wrong, and so they can't be themselves in society, and so they create this mask. So all of these things, these layers, that's why I'm saying that it goes perfect with your life story. It's really society that creates all these shame that doesn't really exist in the animals have the intuition, not because they have the intuition and we don't, but because they don't live in a society. Like, because they don't live in a society, they're wild and they're free to express fully themselves no matter what. They need to hunt, they hunt. They need to kill, they kill. They need to eat, they eat. So whatever they need to do for their own development based on how they're built, they are allowed to do. And so they can just surrender and go with the flow and follow their intuition. And instead, we're so disconnected because we are domesticated animals. That's what we are. We're domesticated animals. And so we're told what the things we need to do and what we shouldn't be doing, which ultimately is functional to society itself and to greedy people on the top of a hierarchy, not to ourselves, right? It's a way of keeping, it's like having a farm and you have a cow that you tell the cow, you should never go too far, right?
There's
like,
wolves out there. It's dangerous.
there's wolves out there. So exactly. So it's just society that does it to us, but it prevents us from doing what every animal does, which is development. Natural developing.
Transform. Yeah, well, I read somewhere just recently that depression is suppression, right? So it's like also these limitations that we're putting on humans, and a lack of self-expression can sometimes lead to these kind of cages and mental imbalances that we're seeing a lot of dark or shadow or feeling hopeless and stagnant. So it's like to be self-expressed, I think, is definitely like a pathway to helping us like live in our light as well, whatever that looks like for anyone. And another quality I think is relentless and deep honesty in truth and feelings, right? And like, so if you can hang on to that connection and help, first of all, it can inspire it in others, or there are techniques or ways you can help teach people how to connect with that, right? But like having that, those are two gauges that can really like navigate living in your highest light, like to be a beacon of light for those in your community. So it's like really honestly, how do I really feel? That's why the journaling practice or any introspective reflective practice can help with that. How do I really feel? Like having that connection with yourself and coming from a centered place. I want my higher self, this place and space I go when I meditate, to be answering that, because it's like more authentic than just getting stuck in the weeds sometimes, right? And so there's that. And then the self-expression part, really, I think as humans, it's strange how we can be so limited, not just in the way society is shaping us, but physically too. Like some of us need to move in wild ways, which is why I am such a fan of ecstatic dance. It's like very freeing, no choreography, variety of music, in community of people who are self-expressed as well, like, or tapping into that. So there's those components, I think, that can really help us, like truth and feelings, really being honest. Because if we can be honest, then we can start to clear the channel, right? And then also inspire others. And it's hard because Roby, you were saying about like people don't want to look at the shadows. Well, yeah, when you're asking yourself how you really feel and like really getting into it, the shadows are going to be like there. Like, and if you're able to observe yourself from like a witness perspective, a higher self, or just slightly detached, journaling again can help that. It helps to kind of be able to see like, okay, what are the awareness, cultivate awareness, right? Seeing for things for what they are, where you've gotten. And some points I make in the book are actually about like this awakening isn't always linear. Sometimes it's like we go and we've had like, oh, layer came off. I'm feeling like my more authentic self now. I'm feeling more, you know, self-expressed, and I'm delivering my gifts, all these things. And oh, how did I end up here? There's like another block or something. And it's like, you know, just trying to navigate through that. But sometimes the block doesn't always look like, oh, and it's not just a small thing. It's like a sinking into like a depressive state or anxious. Like, what is your go-to? You know, it could be anxiety, it could be depressive, it could be patterns that have developed in those, you know, neural pathways of like how to, what is my go-to behavior that might be maladaptive for whatever I'm facing right now, when the fear comes up, when the doubts come up, like, you know, so which is why having regular practices that are connecting us to kind of taking away these things, increasing our awareness, cultivating our physical self-expression too, all of these things I think can really help, you know, be that
Definitely.
version of ourself, or like most radiant version of ourself.
I totally agree with everything you're saying. And I think it's like you touched on a lot of things that we love to talk about on this podcast, like the witness modality.
Oh,
We
yeah.
love the witness modality. It's so important. And like we've emphasized this a lot before, guys, but the witness modality is just like is one of your best tools when you're doing this deep work, because you're separating yourself from the pain. You're able to look at that pain, that shadow, from a third person perspective where you don't own it. And that's really important in the beginning, because it can be really heavy and really hard to look at these things when you're just feeling it so heavy inside of yourself. But when you separate yourself a little bit, you're okay, what if this is happening to someone else? You know, what would it be like for that? What could I say to this person? And you're able to get into that frame of reference with it, then it's going to be so much easier to process it.
Because you
And
remove fear too. You remove
exactly.
the fear because you're de-identifying from your body. You're someone else, right? Like you're looking at yourself from
Right.
the outside. So without fear, you allow consciousness to emerge,
Right.
because you're removing the stress factor, and so the cortex can reactivate again. And I think I love what she said about being authentic. Like that, when you are authentic, then other people feel the same. You know, we're seeing this with the elections now, like with all these politics really putting up a theater. It's a theater that then people believe. But that at that point, it's like truth and fake is like they are like a frequency that have a domino effect, because if you have the truth, and this is something I realized especially by listening to the audiobook of The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, that I think everybody should listen to, because when I started listening to his book, and I was very much into my egoic reality and narcissistic reality of our society, right? When I started listening to the book and how he talks, that he talks from his authentic self, I could not possibly understand where this guy was coming from with his voice. And I was like, why does he talk like this? This is so not what I'm used to. Because I'm coming from academia where everybody, like a lot of people are very narcissistic. So people tend to not be really truthful and authentic. There is a whole mask in politics that you have to. So being authentic is really like something that once you receive it, once you listen to that frequency of authenticity, then you kind of sync to it. You synchronize in that frequency, and then you become authentic too. And that's how it works. And so it's a domino effect. And so when we are authentic with our true self and we talk to people, we awaken others too. And that's why I define myself as an awakener, because that's how it works. You go in the world and you're your authentic self. If you are like initially,
like,
I
who
don't
is she? What is she acting like?
There is a way she's talking like this, but then they question themselves and they feel like it feels good, right? It feels good to be truthful and authentic. And they, as they start talking to you, you don't allow them to, you don't wear your mask. And so you don't allow them to speak with you in a mask kind of frequency. You're very authentic and direct and straightforward. Then they are forced to tap into that frequency as well. And once they do, then they realize they find their own authenticity. So this goes back to healing, to shine our light in the world and to heal the world. This is how we heal the world, by tapping into this frequency that then creates this domino effect, and everything becomes synchronized into this frequency, like molecules that vibrate in a certain way, and by vicinity with other molecules, proximity, then they're forced to, mechanically speaking, because this is also a mechanical thing, like frequencies are a real wave that actually occupies space around us. We go around in the world and we vibrate in that frequency, and then he has to vibrate in that frequency too. You have to vibrate in that frequency too. So we don't realize that because it's in a spiritual energetic level.
Right.
But that really happens, and that happens unconsciously, which is the most beautiful thing. Because even if people have all of these psychological roadblocks to, like, they don't allow them to see the shadow and everything, by forcefully being synchronized in that frequency or being taken away from the previous frequency, there is some shaking happening, and they're kind of forcefully brought to then also discover a part of themselves and a way of vibrating that they didn't know before. And so this is so powerful. What
and I
you're
think
doing.
another thing also related to that, I think, in science we have, like, there's specific points where the state change of like an element or of a material changes, right? You have like a melting point, a boiling point. I believe that, consciousness in the human planet, like in Earth, works in the same way. So when you have enough awakening, when you have enough people that are doing the work and facing their traumas, and I think we're like getting very close to this point, because a lot of people are there now, where it's going to be a shift.
We're anchoring the world towards the
exactly.
of consciousness.
There's going to be a shift, and now this becomes the norm. Where now most people, this is like, okay, of course I'm doing my shadow work. This is just something that you do. Maybe they're teaching about it in school instead of, teaching people how to be indoctrinated instead, which would be beautiful. Let's do that, guys. But I really do feel like this inner feeling that, we're getting close to this really big shift. And I know, like, in the kind of new age spiritual, like, teachings, they call it like the 3D versus the 5D earth. Some people think about this as like, very different things, but I think it's really just a different kind of consciousness is being brought into the commonplace of our world. It's going to be something where we see the shifts, but it's not like we're quite aware of them, because it's just the natural progression that we get onto. It's like, you get onto this,
it's a Gaussian.
You get onto this healing path and you don't realize that you're on it. But then when you look back, you're like, wait, it's so much better now than it was before, and then, but when you're on the actual path, like, you don't quite realize it. And another thing that you were talking about earlier, it was like movement, which I think is also really, really crucial. And it's something that also, like, the teaching that I like to share the most with people, which is Himalayan Kriya Yoga. This also really uses movement, and especially when you're moving in ways that are completely authentic and you're not thinking about it, they're not performative actions. You're getting out of that normal modal network in your brain where you have these kind of pre-programmed motions that we do that we don't even realize anymore. But when you kind of tap into that intuitive knowing, and again, it works the same with ecstatic dance. When you're really in the flow in ecstatic dance, you're not thinking anything. Literally, the music is taking your arm and going up like this, and it's not even a process where your brain is involved at all. It's really just your consciousness interacting with whatever the medium of the sound is that you're receiving. And it's the same thing that will get you out of those patterns. It's going to bring you into a state of presence that's so powerful that you're not going to be able to look at it the same way before that you did before afterwards, because you're in a different state and you really get into that and you can tap into that, and then it'll carry you also through your day. It's going to last for longer. And going back also to what you're talking about, the channel, I know you have a really interesting breakdown of how you kind of separate the chakras into these prisms of different frequency of light in a pyramid. And I'd love it if you could kind of just introduce us to this topic a little bit, because I think it's a really beautiful way of kind of breaking down the chakras.
Sure. Thanks for bringing that up, actually. So basically the modalities that I kind of teach about how to amplify each chakra or unlock its power or potency, or even some of these siddhis, these like advanced psychic powers, is basically through different activities that I call the prism principles. And why I call them that is because each chakra is associated with a light, right? Like a color of light. And then to me, when we have the entire spectrum lit up is when we can amplify our aura. So it's really just like a lot of visuals that I'm like going through with like why I label them that. So the prism principles have to do sort of like with what is that really fun spiritual play that you can do to unlock that power of, like, for example, the root chakra, really feeling rooted, grounded, stable, safe, like basic, very basic. Like this is our basic needs. So it's like, that is the red prism. And I also call it boundaries and spaciousness. So it's like, oh, interesting. This is my kind of like interpretation of each chakra. And like, I talk about kind of setting up our own personal altar. So in like meditation practice, so we have that as our foundational normal thing, you know, before we get into the really fun stuff like the ecstatic dance, like the yoga, chanting, singing, all of it is in within the prism principles as a whole. But like really looking at it as this approach to like, what can I do to cultivate this power within so that when I do have these ups and downs or challenges in life, or like I've revealed a shadow, I've got something to come back to, some practice to come back to. And I can tell you in my own life, it's through wavering in the practices I've had the most challenges. It's not when I'm doing them regularly and incorporating them into my life, but it's more like when there's like a stuckness or stagnancy happening or a challenge or a forgetfulness, right? Like losing that trust, losing the faith, forgetting that innocent inner insan, like trust, faith, light, all of that. So coming back to those and just having this kind of format to follow to unlock this light, you could say. So the prism principles, and again, it's a bit of my own interpretation of like living in this modern world, which is why the part of the title is Reflections of a Modern Mystic. It's like, okay, mystics, they really know internally like what is their truth, right? And they start to help others embody that too by tapping into what does that feel like to live in my truth. Or so there's a lot of things we can question in our society, and I think it's important to. And sometimes when we do that, it's like the society wants to put us back. Oh, they're questioning something that like actually should be questioned, and no, let's put them back in their box. Or it's like, no, fighting that through these practices in the prism principles of just coming back to how can we, it's not just a yoga practice, it's not just dance, and like what is it unlocking within and how to come back to it. Yeah.
I love that. I love it. And you know, like this is like it's beautiful how everything is coming back together to join everything, all the things you're saying. Because the fact that I said at the beginning, you know, that the universe has been split in all of its components, right? That's really what the prism does. A prism splits the light in a full spectrum of frequencies. And yes, all of our chakras, which are just these chakras we work on, which are seven, are really the main frequencies that represent the part of the spectrum. As much as we usually consider the spectrum as colors, you know, red, blue, green, but the spectrum is a full spectrum of colors, right? Which has all of the frequencies in between, the shade between blue and red, and in between all of these colors. And so really like what the Big Bang has done was to split all of us into frequencies. And so the only way to really amplify in the sense of like joining and regaining the consciousness of the whole, and it's really to understand the full spectrum, to go over understanding all of the different wavelengths, which wavelengths are frequencies, you know, like the same thing as a frequency. And a frequency of light or a frequency of sound or a frequency of soul are still part of this spectrum of things that as a prism, the Big Bang split all in all of these frequencies. So understanding all of them to reach this white light, because that's what you reach when you bring all the colors together. It's really a way of understanding we are the whole, we are the universe. And so of understanding all of the light, all the frequencies that we are, they're just white light. And once you understand that white light, that's really your pure self, in a sense, your whole self, which everybody can be, in a sense. It's like we are everything, and at the same time we're this body, but we're also the whole, right? And it all comes from integrating all of these frequencies that humanity represents as much as that we with our chakras represent. So thank you for that too.
Yeah, of course. No worries. And one thing I didn't mention is that like the first part of the book is like part memoir, like personal stories and in kind of ups and downs in like life and like what
It's also
kind of
fun. I feel like you're very fun. Like
yeah.
the way in which you write is really fun. Like you put out some jokes there. I really like the way your style, the way you're writing. And I think it's very insightful in general. Like her life story is really beautiful. Like I think it can give a lot of insights on relationships and on a lot of different things. And so this book is really like I suggest you all to read it as well. It's very beautiful. Let's show it
And
again. Yes. What lights you up?
I
And about the lighting you
Reflections of a
up
Modern Mystic.
about the lighting you up, something that I understood from my spirituality practice and journey as well is really that for us to be aligned with our mission in the world, which can encompass multiple lives and reincarnations or whatever you believe in, but it goes beyond us. It's the same thing as a cell understanding what role it has for the body and embodying it instead of trying to fight and be something else. So really the one perfect way of understanding how to be aligned is to understand what lights you up. So whenever you understand, do I like doing it? It may be the most risky thing in the universe. But if it makes you feel good, that means that it's your mission in the world. It's your what you're supposed to do. It's like a cheetah has a completely different mission in the world than a squirrel. But if the cheetah will likes doing what she does or it does, that's its mission. And we just have to embody how we're built, right? Once you embody what you're built and you eat what you like, in a sense, without taking away all the cravings created by our modern society. But once you really reconnect with your chakras, with your body, and with your body, once you start reconnecting with that, then you start understanding, I actually like this. This is more painful than doing this. And so that's what you're supposed to do. It doesn't matter where it takes you. That's your mission, right?
Yeah, for sure. And on that note, actually, like it's funny that I think a lot of us through the pandemic, like the unique situation of it, like on so many levels and layers, have been impacted, especially with like mental health imbalance, emotional imbalances. I mean, it was a very unique pressure cooker that people were put into amongst many other things. And in my own personal experience, I was going through mothering two very small children, so and had postpartum struggles. So there was that layer added to it. And I think now we're kind of seeing the repercussion of like the mental health like effects and impacts where people are talking about it more. And we're also talking about, like earlier both of you were referencing kind of like this natural, you were describing a natural evolution that's happening with like more people being awakened. And I think that this massive kind of more openness about like talking about mental health is allowing for more of this awakening to happen, because okay, there's the path of, yeah, you can go and figure out what pills you need and start popping all those pills, or you can like really kind of start to uncover like what are the roots of what's going on here, why this anxiety, why this depression, or what is there, maybe it's not one of those, but what is there, and use kind of some of like the more some of the vocabulary in like Western psychology paired with spiritual practice. And I think that can be really powerful and really really a way to come back to our brightest light, right? Like shining that. And as I was going through my own dark period after the pandemic and like finding like, oh, this is like probably some of the darkest, like what's going on here? I am now at the precipice of launching a studio for this embodied practice, combining yoga and dance, which I'll invite you to because it's online for now. And it's a process that I call Storm, which is basically processing shadows in an embodied way. So it's interesting because like I had to go through a dark period too of like, oh gosh, like just the most recent one, I would say. And it's resulted in finding a new thing that lights me up. I mean, it's all connected. It's not like completely all over the place, and it's okay if things that light you up are all over the place. But yeah, like there's coming to that, like maybe, I don't know how we're doing on time, but kind of ending on that note with an invitation to come and maybe giving you guys like a link or something to share with your community.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think, this is maybe a good time to wrap up a little bit. We love to give you some time. You kind of already took that, which is great. But to just promote yourself, give yourself a shout out, anything you want to share with our community. It can be just this or something else, or ways to get in contact with you if you do like personal sessions. Anything you want to just say to our audience before we close things up would be great.
Yeah, I would say for further information on anything we've talked about, the book, the skincare line, and these classes, you could go to shaffali.com or Shaffali on Instagram. And it's spelled Shaffali, same. So Shaffali on Instagram, at Shaffali.
We'll put that in the description below for all you guys too.
Yeah. And again, I appreciate you both having me to be able to, have these high vibe conversations and to spread more light through these discussions. And hopefully people find inspiration from what they've heard.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I really enjoyed this conversation so much. I feel like, we're all shining so bright now after this. So yeah, really big appreciation. I hope that all of you guys out there, grab a little nugget from this episode. Like we say every time, it might be only that one little line that resonates with you. You might have resonated with the whole thing, but I really hope you enjoyed this, and I really hope that, you can take some of this and reflect on it, and maybe interact with Shafali if that calls to you. We'll put her all of her stuff in the description. So if you want to try her skincare products, if you want to try out her new method of like combining dance and yoga, which sounds amazing to me, that'll be down there. All of this. So please give us any feedback, anything that you want to share about this episode. We'd love to have any feedback. And if you have anyone else that you think would be a great person to interview, you can also reach out to us about that. So thank you. Any interaction is good. Please let us know what you think.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Shaffali, so much for coming up, like to share your wisdom with us and all the things you're doing for the world. Because I feel like in our society, especially, you can do things in the world and bring you money that are really not good for anybody and poison the world. And instead, you can do it in an aligned way in which you're trying to bring more light. You're trying to heal others. And so what you're doing is right. Sometimes it takes more effort to do things that are good. It takes more effort because it's way easier to do things that are bad, and it gives you a lot more profit. But choosing to only do things that don't bring suffering but bring healing is a choice that is really what makes you a light worker and what makes you the person that you are and what allows you to really change the world in a positive way. And thanks to your mom as well for giving you all this background that allowed you, your family, everything happens for a reason. In a sense, there's only one journey, and it is not by chance that the pandemic ultimately has brought us to awaken, because pain is a catalyzer for awakening. And so no matter what happens, that's why I always say nothing bad can happen, because this is just how the universe works. The more pain we go through, the more we awaken, the more we shine light, the more we heal, the more we understand that we need to work on our shadow. So thank you so much for what you do every day on yourself, and that allows you to shine on others and on us today, that you brought us also some like really good vibes. And thank you for shining your light on our podcast audience, and thank you for being here, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.